All right, folks, we'll go ahead and get started here. I have 11:01 a.m. On the dot, so we'll go ahead and get going. Is there issues with the audio? Can everyone hear me okay? So everyone can hear. Feel free to work with your mute functions, your computer functions if there's some issues. We're going to go ahead and start. I am recording the presentation as well, so if anyone's having any audio or video issues, feel free to follow up with me after the presentation, and I can send out the recording and the slides for everyone. So just to start, I want to thank you all for your attendance today. We have a lot of information to cover, as I'm sure you all are very aware. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. We've gotten a lot of questions about this coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery fund it's been made available through the U.S. Treasury. And so we wanted to just have this time to go over some of the different requirements and some ways that West Central can help our communities with this process. So just to start the presentation here, and we have first today 3 goals. So first is to clarify the available uses of this unique set of funds. The second is to display the reporting requirements and other administrative needs of these funds. And then the third is really to show how we can, like I said, how we can best assist our communities with these projects. So for our agenda today, we're going to cover 5 topics. The first one being receiving funds. We're going to go over what entitlement versus non-entitlement means, as well as what is needed to receive the funds. We're going to go over some of the different resources available to the communities during this time. We're going to move into some of the available uses and the ineligible uses. There's lots to cover there as well. Onto the reporting requirements, as well as information on the different reports available or needed from our communities. As well as the audit situation. We're going to wrap it up with our role in this and how we can kind of assist our communities with the project administration. So first to start, we're going to talk about receiving funds. Just to make sure we can all see that, for the entitlement units and counties, so this is municipalities with population over 50,000 and our counties. You are going to be going through the Treasury submission portal. So this means that we are going to need to go through that portal that they've established with the U.S. Treasury. All the federal financial assistance recipients are going to have to register with the SAM database. If you don't have this SAM registration or an active one, you need to go ahead and go to sam.gov and begin that registration process as soon as possible. It's a time-consuming process. It does take about 3 weeks to get finalized out. So please do that as quickly as you can. So like I said, this portal is only for counties and entitlement cities with a population of 50,000 or more. The non-entitlement units of the municipal governments will receive the funds through the state of Arkansas. So for this one, you'll need some information to be able to receive these funds through the portal. They're listed there on the screen, just pretty common information, including some financial documents and some contact information for your unit of government. We've also heard that there is a facial recognition and confirmation feature as well that is required. And that's just to ensure a little higher level of cyber security and safety there. So if you have any major questions, the Treasury has provided a helpline for this process. and it's listed there at that email address. It's slfrp@treasury.gov. And we've heard from the Association of Counties that this is a really easy way to get quick answers to questions. So I'd highly recommend that if you are having to use the Treasury portal for your receipt. And this is, again, just showing where on the Treasury Department page you can find this request portal. It's right here with the big red arrow. And with that, on this Treasury page, there are some resources available to us as well that we're using to make sure we're getting the right information. That can be listed here: the interim final rule, the fact sheet, the FAQ section, as well as a quick reference guide. All of these are great resources for this information. Just make sure during this process that you're on the .gov platforms and addresses at all times. We haven't heard any explicit information about scams or phishing scams regarding this, but just make sure you're always on a .gov page when submitting information or anything like that. Moving on to the non-entitlement units. As I mentioned before, there's a little bit different process and requirements between the entitlement units and the non-entitlement units. So for non-entitlement units, the state of Arkansas will be allocating these funds out after they receive their amount from the Treasury. The state is receiving these funds in two kind of tranches from the Treasury itself. In total, the state's going to be receiving $216,225,000 and $138 to be appropriated out. So how much one unit will receive is dependent on its proportion of population relative to the entire population of non-entitlement units in Arkansas. So it's not quite as easy as just the 3 million total population number. It's a little bit more complicated, but we're working on getting that number nailed down so we can kind of expect how much we're going to be seeing here. One of the main requirements here, though, is that this amount that you may receive based on your population may differ just because it is going to be capped at 75% of your latest budget as of January 27th, 2020. And we also expect the state to be allocating this amount out in two tranches, just as they are receiving two tranches from the Treasury. So we're expecting the first one to come next month in June, and then one following 12 months later. We're not sure if there's going to have to be a separate application for the second one, but we do know there will be a request process through the state that they will be managing over the next month or two. On to the state's kind of guidance on this. They haven't really released a ton, but what we do know is that the governor is working with what they're calling an ARP state steering committee. It's made up of a bipartisan group of legislators and some other people from the state government who are making recommendations and trying to kind of formalize this process out. So the main next point is that the Treasury has mandated that states cannot make a process more burdensome than what the Treasury is requiring of entitlement cities. So just because they're having it allocated through the state, they're basically saying that the state can't require more information or more burdensome receipt process. And so this means that a lot of the information we're getting that the Treasury has said, has released so far, will apply to the non-entitlement units as well. So getting on to the next question with the state steering committee, kind of looking at what they've released so far. So the governor and the steering committee have made two prioritizations for funds. The first one being immediate needs. So that's broadband, vaccinations, workforce training, and cybersecurity. So beyond that, we don't really, beyond that, they have said that there are a second kind of prioritization, which is addressing long-term needs of communities. So the way I interpret that is the state recommends we get as much use out of the first category. And then kind of once those are addressed, we can reset ourselves and begin planning for the second prioritization. And that's going to require a lot more kind of thorough planning, as it says there, and stakeholder engagement and community needs assessments and all of that information to kind of figure out what's still left to do with these funds. So on to receiving funds. Similar to what we've already talked about through the Treasury portal, but this is for the non-entitlement units. What information do you need? As you can see there, obviously local government's name, you're going to need your entity's TIN, as well as a DUNS number and address. So from there, you're going to need routing information for your financial institution, as well as you'll need to submit the non-entitlement unit budget that you are basing your request on. So like I said, they're capping the amount at 75% of this budget, and that is your latest budget in effect as of January 27, 2020. So they're going to use this just to make sure that everyone's receiving the proper amount. And they will also be requiring a award terms and conditions agreement. We haven't seen what this is going to look like quite yet, but it'll be pretty straightforward and just basically an assurance that you've read the terms and what's needed from you, and that you are agreeing to comply with the different federal funding requirements. Just a little note on the DUNS number. It's basically a number that you need for the federal government to be able to track how funds are allocated. It's 9 numbers. It's very straightforward process, and they just use this to make sure that it's going to the right places. The main kind of thing here is if you don't have a DUNS number already, you need to visit that website, the Dun & Bradstreet website, or call that number to register or search for a number. You're going to need a lot of the same information that we've talked about here, just making sure that the number is going, the number and the funds are going to the right places. So on to eligible uses of funds. We have a few different themes that they've handed out to us. They've released 7 of these topics areas, and within each one you can kind of see their different eligible uses. So this document can be found on the quick reference guide on the Treasury's page that we visited before. But this kind of shows a few different places that we can use these funds. So supporting public health response, that's pretty straightforward. Containing, mitigating spread of COVID-19. We've talked about vaccinations. We've talked about contact tracing, a lot of those things. That's mainly what we think that's going to go towards. You can also use it for behavioral health care services like listed there, as well as payroll and the covered benefits for the public health workers, healthcare, human services, and public safety staff, to the extent that they've responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. The second one is going to be addressing sort of the negative economic impacts. So that could be a lot of different things. Delivering assistance to workers and families, supporting small businesses, a lot of the stuff that kind of comes naturally to what you might think these funds can be used for. With that, there's also an ability to replace the public sector's revenue loss. So that's just a lot of, there's going to be releasing a formula that you can use to make sure that you're replacing revenue loss in the appropriate way. And we have some more information about that as well. With that, kind of moving on, there's the premium pay for the essential workers, which has been a pretty popular one that I've seen thrown around, as well as the equity-focused services that you can see on the bottom left there. And then a big one that we expect a lot of guidance and conversations on is the water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure allowances. So you can kind of see what they're talking about there. Kind of just planning for the future, trying to find different ways to make improvements or expansions to those facilities. And then there's a lot of information out there on these eligible uses of funds. And while I may not be able to dive into every single possible option that we have, feel free to reach out with questions on these. I know this is a really big topic for a lot of our communities. So moving on next, the U.S. Treasury has listed a few explicit ineligible uses of funds. So please take note of these and ensure that we're not falling into one of these categories with any of our projects. We have a few listed here. And they're pretty straightforward stuff that I'm sure many of you have already heard. But the states and territories may not use these funds to directly or indirectly offset a reduction in the net tax revenue due to any changes in law from March 3rd, 2021 through the last day of the fiscal year, of this fiscal year. So on the Association of Counties call last week, and I'm sure some of you were on, there was a little bit of confusion about whether or not this applies to local units. So additional guidance will kind of come out more on that question, because that's a big one that Treasury has received back. I would go ahead and say, let's just plan for it not being eligible. So we can be pleasantly surprised if it is, but I foresee it not being eligible for local units. The second one is that no recipient may use this funding to make a deposit to a pension fund. This simply means that it can't be an extraordinary contribution to a pension fund. So anything in terms of routine payroll contributions, if you're hiring new staff with funds, is acceptable. It just cannot be an extraordinary or new contribution to a pension fund. Going through that as well, similar options here on 3, 4, and 5. You can't fund debt services with these funds. No legal settlements or judgments can be paid through these funds, as well as no deposits to rainy day funds or financial reserves outside of what's eligible through collecting lost revenue from 2020. Here's another main one that's going to need a little more clarification from the Treasury on, is that they've listed that general infrastructure spending is not covered as an eligible use outside of water, sewer, broadband, and stormwater investments. However, they do have revenue loss provisions that state that road maintenance is an acceptable use of funds because it is a general government service that may have fallen by the wayside with lower revenues. That's a little tricky question right there, and we're going to need more guidance on that one before we can really proceed with confidence. So I would just stay tuned for more information on that one. So moving on to the reporting sections, this is for the entitlement units and counties. We're going to have 2 sections here, one for entitlement units and counties, and then one for non-entitlement units. So for the entitlement units and counties, you will be responsible for these quarterly project and expenditure reports. These are reoccurring quarterly reports. What we're going to see here is just submitting project financial data, information on any contracts, parties, service provided, payment amount, and form. Any sub awards over $50,000 will be reported here, as well as just a general types of projects funded and short summaries about what each project is. So the first one here, they're going to skip 1 quarter and then make the first quarterly project and expenditures report due by October 31st of 2021. This is going to cover the time from date of receipt to September 30th, 2021. So like I said, this is going to be 2 calendar quarters for the first one, and then the subsequent reports will just be the normal calendar quarters. With that, there is an annual report each year that will be submitted that summarizes all of these reports. These will be due every October 31st during the program's life cycle. And for entitlement units, you'll be also required to submit a one-time interim report on August 31st that includes the recipient expenditures by category at the summary level. That's a direct quote from the Treasury guidance there. This is not required of counties. This is only for entitlement units. They kind of lump entitlement units and counties together in a lot of these guidances, but there is some separate reporting requirements between the 2. And just for future reference as well, we expect that most of the uniform guidance requirements will be in place, and so that's a pretty straightforward requirements that we're all familiar with, as well as the single audit expenditures of federal funds over $750,000. So like I said, we're awaiting just specific guidance for which of the uniform guidance are going to be required. and be cognizant that a federal audit will need to take place of expenditures over $750,000. Moving on to the next section for the entitlement units and counties. It's listed here, and again, this is direct from the guidance. States, territories, metropolitan cities, and counties with a population that exceeds 250,000 residents will be required to submit that annually occurring recovery plan performance report. So this is a little different than the annual report that you're going to need to be submitting as well. That summarizes the quarterly expenditure reports. This is going to basically be an evaluation toolkit. So basically ensuring you have a plan to ensure your project outcomes, making sure that you have evaluation metrics and tools ready for you, as well as program performance data. So what they're looking for here is just an assurance that the project outcomes have been considered and you have considered exactly how you plan for your projects to meet these outcomes. So the first one's going to be due on August 31st of 2021, and will cover from the date of award to July 31st of 2021. These also must be published to the public-facing portion of the entitlement unit's website. We are awaiting a little bit further guidance on this one as well, if this applies to counties or just the entitlement units. Like I said, they've been lumping them together, and then at random points in the guidance, they take them apart. So that's still awaiting the question there on that one. With non-entitlement units, I know we have a lot of non-entitlement units on the call today, so we'll spend a little bit more time here. The process is somewhat similar and simpler, but it still requires some careful attention and due diligence. You will also be responsible for quarterly project and expenditures report, as well as the annual report that needs to be submitted on October 31st of each year. With this, the NEUs, the non-entitlement units, will be responsible, or will be receiving a NEU recipient number, which will be used for reporting on these funds. You will receive this number upon successful requests for funds through the state. So once you see this number, please keep track of it. It'll be extremely important over the next few years to make sure we have this information. Like I said, the first report for NEUs is due to Treasury by October 31st. In addition to other reporting requirements, the NEUs will be asked to provide the following information on October 31st. It's just kind of a first report to ensure that the funds have been allocated appropriately. So looking here, it's going to be, again, that NEU recipient number. It's going to be AR and then a 4-digit code. You're going to need to submit a copy of that signed award agreement that we discussed earlier, as well as the signed assurance of compliance with the Title VI there of the Civil Rights Act. With this, you're also going to need to go ahead and submit copies of any of those actual budget documents validating the budget totals that you provided to the state. So they just want to double check that the totals you provided are matching with what you provided the state there. So moving on here, I wanted to make this page because I know we've thrown around a lot of different dates, a lot of different reports and plans and all these different things that are needed. But feel free to screenshot this selection here. This has all of the key dates that are going to be needed. Just kind of running through them really quick. March 3rd, it's already passed, but it's the beginning of the covered period. So that has a little bit of meaning for the provisions that you can't reduce tax expenditures based on that covered period. The second date here, July 9th, is the deadline to comment on the interim final rule. There will be this time for comment so that U.S. Treasury can put together all these comments and try to modify the guidance to best fit the kind of current realities. The third date there is August 31st. It's going to be the deadline to submit the first interim report and the recovery plan performance report. Again, those two are just for entitlement units, and we're still awaiting further guidance on if counties will need to develop that recovery plan performance report. The fourth date listed is the one that comes up the most, and that's going to be the deadline for the annual reports every annual cycle, as well as the first quarterly project expenditure report that all communities will be responsible for. The last date is 3 years in the future here, but just want to make sure these are on your radar. The funds must be obligated by December 31st of 2024. That does not mean they have to be spent or incurred in any way. They just must be obligated. So just keep that in mind. I know we have a little bit of time on that, but again, just keep it in mind for future reference. And then December 31st of 2026 will be the final day that all funds must be spent and all work and performance completed. So this just basically means that this is the end of the life cycle. I haven't seen any guidance about extensions so far, but I'm assuming that that's going to come after the comments period on the interim final rule. So again, just take a screenshot, go ahead and put all these dates into your calendars. You know, these are going to be just the main dates that we need to keep track of moving forward. So after hearing about all of this information and reporting requirements, our main next question is just, you know, how can West Central help with all of this? So this next slide is going to show an administrative services rubric that can be used as the starting point for all of us to contract with West Central. We normally manage a lot of these similar types of projects. You know, we're more than happy to help our communities ensure their federal compliance. You know, it can be very complicated, and we understand that everyone is busy with a lot of different things right now. So we want to make sure that everyone has the ability to contract out with us and ensure their compliance with all of these different requirements. So the main kind of services we can provide are very typical of what we normally do with all of our federal and state grants. Reporting management, closing out final reports, preparing for federal audits. You know, we are a local procurement unit as well, so we can handle procurement. We can handle financial management, contract management. We can also just ensure, you know, labor compliance, making sure that we're, you know, following all the guidance there to the T. With that, you know, once we get to that point where we're maybe unsure of how the funds can be spent or unsure of what we really need, the community need, you know, we can dive deeper and assist with community needs assessments, you know, project identification, making sure that, you know, we're getting all the outcomes we want to see. So we're more than happy for this to serve as just kind of a baseline rate, fee, and service schedule for our communities. And we want to make sure that we are, you know, using funds in the best and most appropriate manner. So please feel free to reach out as soon as needed. You know, we're going to have a lot of interest in this, so we want to make sure we can handle all of the projects that come our way. So with all that being said, we can switch over to the question and answer portion here. While we may not be able to answer every single question that we get, you know, we can look into the guidance, we can look into the interim final rule and get back with everyone if I'm unable to answer any questions at this point. It's always kind of better to be correct rather than quick in my mind, so I want to make sure we're getting out the most accurate information we can. You can also find my contact information on the screen right now, which I'm sure many of you already have, but I just want to make sure. Please reach out, you know, with any future questions as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop sharing the screen here, and we can move into a question and answer time. Okay, I see a question in the chat here. We can just start with that one. Are you saying that the NEUs do not need to be registered in sam.gov? So you will need a DUNS number to be able to receive funds. And then in order to submit reports to Treasury, you will need to be registered in sam.gov. So that's what Dwayne has answered there. So we'll need both of those. In order to receive the funds, however, it's my understanding that you only need a DUNS number. But in order to actually report on the funds, you will need to be registered in SAM. And so that is a lengthy process, and it will guaranteed take at least 3 weeks to get that SAM registration complete. So I know many communities and counties already have that worked out. Just ensure that you have that information collected whenever you're going to request funds, because that will be needed. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that come up as well. And you can feel free to put it in the chat or just ask it outright. You know, I will be available at my contact information for any questions over the next couple of months. I know everything's a little bit unsure right now with a lot of this, but we're hoping that you know, with our assistance, with the Municipal League, the Association of Counties, we can all get everything straightened out for everyone and ensure compliance in all different ways. So I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. Like I said, feel free to send it along, you know, to my email address, acoker@wcapddd.org, or give me a call at 501-525-7577. My extension is 1018. So feel free to give me an email, shoot me a call, and to make sure that we're getting all the right information out to everyone. Yes, I will be sharing the slides as well as the recording with everyone. So feel free to look through those again. Make sure, like I said, make sure we're getting all the right information out to everyone. So with that, I'll go ahead and just wrap it up here, and hope everyone has a great rest of the week and a good weekend and a happy Memorial Day. So thanks everyone for attending, and we'll go ahead and wrap it up here.